The emergency signal from the Kepler Mining Consortium cut through the silence of deep space like a scream in the night. Commander Na's voice crackled with desperation as static overwhelmed the transmission. "This is Commander Na, requesting immediate assistance there, consuming everything." The words hung in the void for a moment before the signal died completely, leaving behind only the cold emptiness of space. 3 days later, the Galactic Council's rescue fleets arrived at what used to be the bustling Kepler mining stations. Instead of the usual glow of industrial lights and the steady stream of cargo ships, they found a graveyard. Twisted metal debris floated where massive mining platforms once stood. The silence was deafening. No distress beacons, no survivors, no signs of life whatsoever. Admiral Yoon of the Terran Defense Force stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the destruction through the main viewport. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the railing tighter as he processed what he was seeing. The debris patterns told a story that made his blood run cold. This wasn't an explosion or equipment failure. Something had methodically torn apart everything in this sector. "Sir, we're detecting traces of 3 different alien military divisions," reported his communications officer. "All destroyed attempting rescue operations." Yoon nodded grimly. The Vorthan battle fleet had arrived first. Their heavy cruisers were legendary for their firepower. Pieces of their distinctive blue hulls now drifted among the wreckage. The Kalari Defense Force had come next, bringing their advanced shield technology. Their energy signatures were barely detectable now, scattered across thousands of kilometers. Finally, the Zephyrian War Council had sent their elite strike teams, warriors who had never known defeat. Even they hadn't lasted long against whatever did this. "How many people worked these stations?" Yoon asked quietly. 40,000 miners, support staff, and security personnel across all platforms," came the reply. 40,000 souls, gone, without a trace. No bodies, no escape pods, nothing. It was as if they had simply vanished from existence. Yoon had seen war before, had witnessed the destruction that modern weapons could bring, but this was different. This felt wrong on a fundamental level. "Scan everything again," he ordered. Whatever did this might still be out there. As his crew worked frantically at their stations, Yoon couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Something had eliminated the most advanced military forces in known space with apparent ease. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, it was still hungry. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was in complete chaos. Representatives from dozens of species filled the great chamber, their voices rising in heated debate about what should be done. The Vorthans wanted to establish a quarantine zone around the entire sector. The Kalari suggested forming a committee to study the threat for the next 6 months. The Zephyrians proposed abandoning the Outer Rim entirely and pulling all forces back to core worlds. Fleet Admiral Lee sat in the human section, listening to the endless arguments with growing frustration. His jaw clenched as another alien diplomat suggested they needed proper analysis before taking any action. Behind him, Captain Su leaned forward and whispered, "Sir, we're getting more distress signals from nearby systems. Whatever's out there is moving fast." Lee had heard enough. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber, and gradually, the debates died down as all eyes turned to him. "We don't abandon our people," he declared, his voice carrying clearly across the vast room. "While you discuss protocols and form committees, humans are dying out there." The Vorthan ambassador, a tall creature with silver skin, spoke up dismissively. "Admiral Lee, humanity is still young in galactic terms. Perhaps you should leave this to more experienced species who understand the complexities involved." Lee's eyes hardened. Your experienced fleets are floating debris right now." A murmur of shock rippled through the chamber at his bluntness. Without waiting for a response, Lee activated his personal communicator. "Captain Su, Transmit immediate deployment orders to the 7th Deep Strike Fleet. Full combat readiness. We launch within the hour. Sue's fingers flew across her tactical display, sending encrypted coordinates and battle plans to human ships across 3 star systems. Orders transmitted, sir. All ships acknowledge and are moving to jump positions. The alien ambassadors watched in stunned silence. Where their species required weeks of planning and endless approvals, humanity had mobilized its entire deep space fleet in minutes. The Kalari representative, whose species prided themselves on efficiency, leaned forward in amazement. "This is unprecedented," whispered the Zephyrian delegate. "They're actually doing it." Within 30 minutes, human warships were streaming toward jump points from every corner of human space. No debates, no committees, no hesitation. Just action. Lee turned back to the assembly. "When your people are in danger, you don't debate. You act." He walked toward the exit, leaving behind a room full of aliens who were beginning to realize they might have seriously underestimated humanity's resolve and capability. The jump from hyperspace always left Commander Han feeling slightly nauseous, but what he saw when his scout ships emerged made his stomach drop for entirely different reasons. Where the Kepler system's asteroid belt should have been filled with floating rocks and mining operations, there was something that defied everything he knew about the universe. Crystalline creatures. The size of battleships moved through space. Like living ships, their surfaces gleaming with an unnatural light. They weren't just flying around the asteroids, they were eating them. Han watched in horror as one of the entities wrapped itself around a massive asteroid and somehow absorbed it completely, growing visibly larger in the process. "Commander, you need to see this," Lieutenant Da called out from her sensor station, her voice tight with fear. "They're not just consuming the asteroids, they're converting the matter into more of themselves." Han moved to her station and looked at the readings. The data was impossible, yet undeniable. These things were taking raw rock and metal and somehow transforming it into living tissue that matched their own structure. "How many are there?" "Sir, I count at least 300 in this sector alone, but the numbers keep changing. Every time one feeds, it splits into 2 smaller ones." The tactical display showed the full scope of the nightmare. What had started as dozens of creatures was now hundreds, and the count was rising by the minute. They moved with perfect coordination, like a single mind controlling multiple bodies. There was no chaos, no confusion, just efficient, methodical consumption. Captain Kim's voice crackled over the communication system from his position deeper in the system. "Commander Han, we've got a problem. I'm watching for Kalari colonies on my tactical display, and they just went dark. All of them, within minutes of each other." Han felt his blood turn cold. The Kalari colonies housed millions of people. Kim confirmed that report. "Confirmed, sir. The swarm is spreading faster than anything we've ever encountered. They're not just eating asteroids now, they're consuming entire worlds." Through the bridge viewport, Han could see more crystalline entities emerging from behind the remains of what used to be Kepler Station. They moved like a metallic plague, spreading outward in all directions. Each one that fed became 2, and those 2 would feed and become 4. "Get me Admiral Lee immediately," Han ordered. "We need reinforcements, and we need them now. This isn't just a rescue mission anymore, this is an extinction event waiting to happen." Admiral Lee stood in the command center of Terra Station, watching the tactical displays show one disaster after another. Red dots representing lost colonies blinked out faster than his staff could update them. The crystalline swarm was spreading through the outer systems like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. "Sir, we've lost contact with 3 more mining colonies in the Tau sector," reported his communications officer. "That's 12 systems gone dark in the past 6 hours. Lee closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. Every conventional weapon humanity possessed had been tested against these creatures, and nothing worked. Their adaptive shielding absorbed energy weapons, their numbers made missile strikes pointless, and they just kept growing stronger with every world they consumed. There was only one option left, one that humanity had hoped never to use. "Activate Titan Protocol," Lee commanded, his voice steady. Despite the magnitude of what he was ordering, the command center fell silent. Every person there knew what those words meant. Engineer Yu looked up from her station, her eyes wide. "Sir, are you certain? The power requirements alone could cripple half our colonies." "Do it," Lee replied firmly. "We're already losing everything anyway." Yu's fingers trembled slightly as she entered the activation codes that had been locked away for 30 years. Across human space, dormant orbital shipyards that had been floating. Silently, in the void suddenly burst into brilliant light. Massive construction bays that hadn't operated since humanity's first expansion into deep space roared back to life with the sound of 1,000 thunderstorms. "My God," Yu whispered, as her screens lit up with data streams. "The Neptune yards are drawing power equivalent to an entire star. The Luna facilities are consuming the output of our biggest fusion reactors." On the main display, they watched as civilization-sized factories came online one by one. Each shipyard was larger than most space stations, capable of building vessels that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. These weren't just construction facilities, they were the remnants of humanity's most ambitious engineering projects, mothballed when the galaxy seemed peaceful. "Estimated construction time?" Lee asked. Yu checked her calculations twice before answering. 72 hours for the first units, sir. But the power drain is so massive that we're having to shut down non-essential systems across 17 colonies. Lee nodded grimly. In 72 hours, the swarm would have consumed dozens more worlds. But if these ancient shipyards could deliver what they promised, humanity might finally have weapons capable of fighting back against the impossible. The Neptune shipyards had never built anything like this before. As the massive construction arms pulled away from the hull, the first Titan-class vessel emerged from its berthing dock like a sleeping giant awakening. The wrath of Prometheus stretched over a kilometer from bow to stern, its dark hull gleaming with an almost organic sheen that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Captain Nam stood on the bridge, feeling smaller than he ever had in his 20 years of military service. The command center alone was larger than most warships, with holographic displays floating in mid-air around him. Through the massive viewport, he could see weapon batteries that looked like city blocks mounted along the ship's hull. "All systems showing green, Captain," reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Park. "The main cannons are drawing power equivalent to a small sun." Nam nodded, trying to comprehend the sheer scale of destruction at his fingertips. These weren't just weapons, they were planet crackers, designed to split worlds in half if necessary. He'd read the classified reports about what Titan-class ships could do, but seeing it firsthand was overwhelming. Across the solar system, 11 more Titans were emerging from their construction bays. Each one was unique, built for different combat roles, but all sharing the same impossible size and power. Admiral Choi coordinated the fleet from his flagship Hammer of Gods, watching his captains run final system checks on weapons that had only existed in theoretical designs until now. "Admiral, the reality drives are showing optimal function," reported Engineer KO from the drive section. "We're ready to warp space on your command." The reality drives were perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the Titans. Instead of traditional engines, they literally bent space around themselves, allowing these massive ships to move faster than physics should allow. When 12 Titans moved together, they created gravitational waves that could be detected from neighboring star systems. Captain Jang, commanding the storm of Titans, watched his crew of hand-picked veterans work at their stations. These weren't ordinary sailors, they were humanity's absolute best, soldiers who had proven themselves in dozens of battles across the galaxy. Each Titan required a crew of thousands, and every single person had volunteered for what everyone knew might be a suicide mission. Fleet formed up and ready, Admiral Nam reported as the 12 Titans arranged themselves in battle formation. They moved through space like moving mountains, their massive hulls casting shadows that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. For the first time since the swarm appeared, humanity had weapons that might actually make a difference. The moment the 12 Titans opened fire, the Kepler system became something unrecognizable. Space itself twisted and buckled as weapons that could destroy planets unleashed their fury on the crystalline swarm. Commander Park stood in the tactical center of the flagship Wrath of Prometheus, coordinating an attack unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. "All Titans, fire pattern Alpha 7, Park commanded into his headset. "Target the largest clusters and work your way down." The synchronized volley that followed turned space inside out. Beams of pure energy, each one thick as a city block, lanced through the void and struck the Devourer formations. The creature's adaptive shielding, which had effortlessly absorbed every alien weapon thrown at them, suddenly began flickering and failing under the impossible barrage. "Direct hits on the primary cluster," reported Tactical Officer Jin, his voice filled with amazement. "Their shields are actually buckling." Through the bridge viewport, Park watched something that defied belief. The crystalline entities, which had moved with perfect confidence while consuming entire worlds, were actually hesitating. For creatures that had never known resistance, the sight of their shielding failing seemed to cause genuine confusion. Captain Rowe, commanding the storm of Titans, unleashed a reality-warping torpedo that folded space around itself. When it struck a group of Devoros, it didn't just destroy them, it erased them from existence, leaving behind a perfectly spherical void in space where they had been. "They're changing formation," Jin called out, studying his tactical display. "The smaller ones are pulling back behind the larger entities." But humanity's tactics were unlike anything the swarm had encountered. Instead of the predictable strategies used by other galactic species, the human fleet moved in seemingly random patterns that actually followed complex mathematical sequences. The Titans would strike from one angle, then instantly warp space to attack from a completely different direction. The tide of battle began to shift. For the first time since their appearance, the Devourers were taking heavy losses faster than they could reproduce. Their perfect coordination started breaking down as individual entities began making defensive moves instead of following the swarm's collective will. "Sir, multiple enemy formations are pulling back toward the outer system," Jin reported, barely able to contain his excitement. "They're actually retreating." Park allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he watched the crystalline entities flee from human weapons. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy, that had consumed entire civilizations without breaking stride, were finally running away. But he knew this was just the beginning. Whatever intelligence controlled the swarm would adapt and return stronger. The celebration on the bridge of Wrath of Prometheus lasted exactly 47 seconds. Commander Park was reviewing damage reports when Lieutenant So's voice cut through the victory cheers like a knife through silk. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures emerging from dark space," she announced, her voice tight with fear. "Multiple contacts, size unknown, but they're big." Park rushed to her station, hoping it was just sensor echoes from their recent battle. What he saw on the display made his blood turn to ice. Dozens of new contacts were materializing at the edge of the system, each one exponentially larger than anything they'd just fought. "How many?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Sir, the computer is having trouble counting them," So replied, her hands shaking as she recalibrated the sensors. "I'm reading hundreds, no, thousands. They just keep coming." On the main tactical display, the true scope of the nightmare became clear. What emerged from the darkness between stars wasn't just more of the same crystalline entities they'd been fighting. These were titans among titans, each one the size of a small moon. with surfaces that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Admiral Kong watched from his command ship as billions of entities poured into normal space like a metallic tide. The creatures they'd fought so hard to defeat, the ones that had consumed entire worlds, suddenly looked tiny by comparison. It was like comparing house cats to tigers. "Admiral," came Captain Lee's horrified voice over the communications system. "The entities we just defeated, they're joining up with the new arrivals. They're not acting like refugees, they're acting like scouts reporting back." The terrible truth hit Admiral Kong like a physical blow. Everything they'd fought, all the worlds that had been consumed, the destruction of multiple alien fleets, it had all been a test. The swarm had been studying human tactics, learning their weaknesses, measuring their strength. "They were never trying to conquer the galaxy," Kong whispered, the realization making him feel sick. "They were just figuring out what we could do." The new arrivals arranged themselves in perfect formation, their movements showing a level of coordination that made the original swarm look chaotic. Worse yet, the sensors were detecting familiar energy patterns the creatures had somehow adapted to replicate human weapon signatures. "Sir, incoming transmission from the lead entity," So reported. "It's using our own communication protocols." For the first time in the conflict, the swarm was trying to talk, and somehow, that was more terrifying than anything they'd faced so far. Admiral Lee stood in the command center, watching the impossible tide of crystalline entities flowing toward them like a living avalanche. Every tactical simulation showed the same result: total annihilation within hours. The new swarm wasn't just larger, it had learned from their previous encounter and adapted countermeasures to every human weapon. "Sir, the Galactic Council fleets are requesting permission to withdraw," reported Communications Officer on. "The Vorthan ambassador says this is beyond any reasonable military response." Lee almost laughed at the irony. The same aliens who had questioned humanity's capabilities were now running for their lives. Grant them safe passage. Get every non-human ship out of this sector immediately. Across the tactical display, alien fleets streamed away from the battle zone at maximum speed. The proud Kalari Defense Force, the mighty Zephyrian War Council, even the battle-hardened Vorthan Empire, fleeing from a threat they couldn't comprehend. "Link all reality drives," Lee ordered, his voice steady, despite the magnitude of what he was asking. "If we fail, the galaxy dies anyway." Captain Min, aboard the Hammer of Gods, felt her stomach drop as she received the order. Linking 12 reality drives had never been attempted before. The theoretical calculations suggested it could tear apart the fabric of spacetime itself, potentially creating a black hole that would consume the entire star system. "Are you certain, Admiral?" she asked over the secure channel. "Do it," Lee replied. "We're beyond safe choices now." The process began slowly. Each Titan's reality drive had to synchronize perfectly with the others, creating a harmonious frequency that would amplify their combined power exponentially. Captain Bo watched his engineering displays show energy levels that shouldn't exist in normal space. "Drive synchronization at 60%, reported Engineer KO, sweat beading on his forehead. "Sir, the power buildup is creating gravitational waves. We're literally bending space around us." Through the viewports of all 12 Titans, the crews watched their ships begin to glow with an otherworldly light. The hulls pulsed with energy that looked like captured lightning, and space around them shimmered like heat waves rising from desert sand. 80% synchronization, KO called out. "Sir, we're approaching the point of no return." The Titans now blazed like newborn stars, their combined reality drives preparing to reshape the fundamental laws of physics. It was humanity's final gambit: either they would save the galaxy, or destroy it completely in the attempt. When the linked reality drives finally activated, they didn't just push the Devourers back, they erased them completely. Admiral Hai watched from the bridge of her heavily damaged Titan as the crystalline entities simply vanished, not destroyed but removed from existence itself. The space where billions of creatures had been moments before was now perfectly empty, as if they had never existed at all. Sensor readings confirm complete elimination, reported Lieutenant Cho, his voice filled with awe. There's no trace of them anywhere in this dimension. They're just ... gone. The cost had been enormous. 4 of the 12 Titans were completely destroyed, their crews vaporized when the reality drives overloaded. 3 more were so badly damaged they would never fight again. But somehow, impossibly, humanity had won. Admiral, incoming transmissions. From across the galaxy, Communications Officer Park announced. Every species in the Council wants to know what happened here. I looked out at the surviving Titans as they slowly patrolled the empty space where an extinction-level threat had existed just hours before. The wrath of Prometheus moved like a wounded giant, its hull scarred and blackened, but still functional. These ships and their crews had just saved every living thing in the galaxy, within days. Representatives from every known species arrived at the battle site. The Galactic Council, which had spent centuries debating humanity's place among the stars, held an emergency session that lasted less than an hour. The vote was unanimous. By formal decree of the Galactic Council, announced the Vorthan Prime Minister, his voice carrying none of its usual arrogance, humanity is hereby recognized as the galaxy's primary military protectors. All species pledged their support to the Titan fleet. The ceremony was broadcast across 1,000 worlds. Captain Nam, standing on the bridge of his rebuilt Wrath of Prometheus, watched alien children on distant planets, pointing up at the stars, where human ships now patrolled. The Titans had become more than warships, they were symbols of hope. Sir, incoming priority message from Terra Command, reported his communications officer. Admiral Lee's face appeared on the main screen, looking older but proud. Congratulations, Captain. You and your crews have earned something no military force in galactic history has ever achieved: the complete trust of every civilized species. As the Titans took their positions along the galaxy's rim, watching for threats that might emerge from the darkness between stars, humanity had finally found its true purpose among the cosmos. They were no longer the young species asking for acceptance. They were the guardians standing watch while others slept peacefully.